good. How are you?
Super good. Super good. Very excited about what we're going to talk about today.
Yes,
This
I
oh
know. And it's our sixth episode. So, welcome to the Picture Book Matters podcast, episode number six.
wow.
We are really keeping our
Yeah.
promise. We did promise to our viewers and listeners on I think when we did our third episode that we will be more regular, and here we are back with our sixth episode. And those who are new here, we are Eva and Smita. Eva is an award-winning author and an editor, and I'm Debasmita. I'm Smita. I am a picture book illustrator, graphic novelist, and a film producer, and we are the co founders of Picture Book Matters. Picture Book Matters is a platform through which we organize masterclasses and workshops to support emerging and aspiring picture book creators. And this is the Picture Book Matters podcast where we discuss different things related to picture books, things that matter about picture books. So here we are with our sixth episode, and Eva, like always, is going to tell us what's the topic today.
Today we're going to talk about writing the local story that is global. So what we call glocal stories, right? Basically, this is, I think, the essence of what Smith and I do in our stories. We write stories that are important to us, important to our heritage and our culture and our identities as as creators, really, illustrators, storytellers, and writer. Right. So writing the local story and how we do it, and how you can also do that. Yeah.
That's a very, very interesting topic. And I feel that, like you said, it is such an important topic as well. I mean, not just for us. In general, I would say that the stories which are locally produced, which are rooted, locally rooted, they have this global appeal, right? That's the beauty of it, that through that local story, one gets to know about a new world, and which also connects with an universal theme, perhaps, which brings different worlds together. So yes, so we are going to be talking about the global stories. So how do you want to do this, Eva? Do you want to talk about any particular stories or themes?
I think themes would be a good way to start. All stories are actually local, if you think about it,
Yeah.
because all themes are global. Theme of love, family bonds, intergenerational relationships, how you get on with your parents. I mean, we're talking about picture books here. You
Hmm.
know, these are actually very global themes, isn't it? No matter where the story comes from, right? If you kind of bear that in mind, as a writer, to bear that in mind from whatever region you come from, is to tell your story with authenticity, feel, and to tell it in a way that comes from you, right? And to engage with your readers so that all children reading that particular local story can understand, right? So in this, I want to talk about this book. I'm going to show the book. Just get a minute. It's called I Love Chinese New Year, right? It's a scholastic publication. It was illustrated by Xin Li. Xin Li is like me. She's part of the ethnic Chinese diaspora. She was China born, whereas I was born in Singapore. She lives in Norway, and I live in London. But yet we've come together to collaborate on this story. She's the illustrator, I'm the writer, and we brought the local global, right? And I think festival stories are a good way to go about doing that. Finding global themes like love, food is a very good one, because, all children must eat. And, many children are curious about other types of food as the world globalizes more and more, right? What about you?
Yes. I mean, definitely. When it comes to global stories or local stories, I just feel that the local stories are personal, and personal is also very political. And no matter how we present it, there is politics involved in these personal stories, because we are trying to introduce new cultures, new ways of living, like you said, whether it's festivals or the food we eat or the way we dress, the places where we live. Everything is very personal, but it also talks about a certain culture, a certain community. And through those local stories, when we share those local stories, they reach out to people, more people who are perhaps unaware of those cultures. It could be also about local language, local dialects. Like there's so many layers in this kind of storytelling, right? Which makes it even more interesting. What I have felt in local storytelling is there are two ways to approach it. One is, if you start with a very specific thing, let's say you talk about a certain festival, like in the book that you just showed, it's Chinese New Year. So it's a very local thing that you take first, and then you tie it up with an universal theme of, let's say, relationships, or intergenerational relationships, or family, or love, or bonding. The other way to approach it is like you take a universal theme first,
Mm,
and from there you tie it with a local incident. So
mm,
I wanted to talk to you about this book, Terminal Tree, which is a graphic novel by Penguin Random House, which is written and illustrated by me. And in
mm,
this story, it was the second way I approached it, because I had a global theme, which is, a coming of age story, a girl, a young Muslim girl trying to get into martial arts and making a mark in the world history of sports. But from there, it becomes a very local story, because she's also a Kashmiri girl. Kashmir is a region in India which is a conflict zone for many, many years, and there are issues over there. So through the story of this, through this universal theme, you suddenly reach through the allies, the backyards of these families living in Kashmir, and you come to know about a completely different new place and new culture and new language and new food, the way they dress, the way they talk, all those things through the story.
absolutely. I loved that story, by the way. And I'm not saying it because, we're business partners and friends. I really enjoyed it and I learned so much from it. I mean, the personal is political, as we say in the arts. I mean, it's not that we want to get political in picture book making, but then the thing is that we cannot help that being writing the books, the stories we write. Because I feel that I mean here in the UK and the US, we are known as underrepresented or marginalized. That makes me laugh, marginalized authors. Whereas in the countries that we come from, we are dominant and, the opposite of marginalized, actually. So, and that really gives me as a writer, a very different perspective in engaging with my audience,
Mm,
right?
mm,
But I am very adamant on writing that local story and
mm,
making it global. So, for example, I have a new book, and this book is called Grandpa Ye's Journey South. And like you in Terminal 3, this was from the second perspective where I took a universal theme and
mm,
spun it and made it local, right?
mm,
So the universal theme here is immigration and migration.
mm,
And it is a local story because it's pertinent to the immigration and migration stories or narratives in Singapore.
mm,
So, and there is also a special food like in Terminal 3, right? And that special food is this pink kueh here, which in Hokkien or Teochew, this is a Teochew story. Teochew is a dialect or a language of a particular group of ethnic Chinese people, and it's called the Peng Kueh,
Mm.
and it's something that my mother, who is Teochew, loves and gave us to eat when we were children. And this story is really, taking going global and
Mm.
making it local, but still local in a way because the themes are, family bonds, a love for children, building a family together, um, eating together as a family. So there's that family bond. And in children's stories, it's important to let children know that they're not alone in this world. They have a family, even if their family is not the family of origin, right? Even if their family is one who is adopted,
Mm.
um, they have a family. So I think that that is also a very universal theme to, explore and expand on.
100%. 100%. I mean, uh, you're so right that these stories are very important, I feel, specifically in children's book industry or children's literature in
Mm,
general, because you see, I mean, I'm not saying that like you said in the beginning that uh, every story is a local story, right? I mean, every story, whether it's a tale of two cities, it is.
yeah,
I mean, everybody knows that it's the most universal story, but it is a tale of two cities, very particular two cities, right?
yeah.
So, yes, every story is global. And when it comes to adult narratives, it becomes more understandable because then at that point, I feel adults have a say, or they can choose their stories, the stories they want to read, right?
Mm,
Because they are
mm,
consciously making an effort that I want to read these kind of stories. Let's say, like I can tell you about myself. I love reading Turkish writers. So Elif Shafak
mm,
is one of my favorites,
mm.
and
Me too.
yeah, so there is that interest, or Nigerian writers. I love reading Nigerian writers. So that is because I'm making that conscious effort to read those stories or
Mm,
know about those cultures. Whereas for children, it is what they're being exposed to by by the guardians or by their parents or by their teachers, right? So it's important, it becomes even more important for children when they see this kind of literature which
mm,
is coming from another part of the world, the story that narrates another culture, the story that talks about another world that they're not familiar with,
mm.
because that's their window, or their the doors or the windows to enter into the new world and understand about that culture. And that happens in a very organic way, right? Because
Mhm.
here they're not making a choice, but they're being exposed to that thing, and through storytelling it will stay with them for a very long time.
Absolutely. I mean, stories are portals, aren't they,
Yes.
into different worlds, and in when I was growing up, and I never tire of telling this story. I hope people don't tire of hearing it because it is true for me. I never read any books that had anyone that looked like me in it, or ate the food I ate, or or did the things I did. I read books that were like from English by English authors, American authors as well. I mean, also I also read Greek and Roman myths and legends and all that kind of things. But but it's still very Anglo-European centric,
Mm.
right? And yesterday, in fact, I went to so funny. Me and my husband went to St. Albans to the Christmas market, and we just chanced upon this store that sold Turkish delights. And I said to my husband that, oh my God, Turkish delights. When I was a child, I read this book, that had, it's called the Narnia Chronicles, right? And there was Turkish delights in it. I was so obsessed. At that point as a child, I didn't know what Turkish delights were. I just knew it was very delicious, and that one of the characters was lured. with these Turkish delights and committed, atrocities or whatever. But, because I was quite a mischievous child, I said, oh my goodness, I really must eat this Turkish delight. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I discovered what they actually were,
Hmm.
right? So as children, we do suspend our disbelief. We read about these things that we have never tasted, right? You
Yes.
know, but what it does to us, I think, unconsciously, it makes us long for these things that we've never tasted.
Yes.
Yeah, it makes
Yes.
us curious for the world, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 100%. And yeah, I mean, there is this perspective, the perspective that you shared, where you were not exposed to, let's say, your kind of local stories. You didn't see much of representation, and that's why there was this innate desire in you when you started writing,
Mm,
perhaps, that you wanted to show your stories to your kids or to the next
yes.
generation, right? In my case, it's the other way around because I grew up in a place in Calcutta, in India, where I was luckily not just because of the city, but also because of my parents. I was pretty much exposed to different kind of literature from all over the world, whether it was Russian folk tales, Chinese folk tales, or English stories for sure. There was French cartoons. At the same time, I was also exposed to Bengali literature. And
Mm,
Bengali literature was so prolific. I mean, it had comic strips, it had short stories, long novels, and it was just so much, and all those things. When I was absorbing all those ideas together, I always felt like there is this combination of different cultures coming
mm,
together, and constantly, whether it was in Rabindranath Tagore's stories or the other writers that I read in Bengali, I've always felt that there was a very strong influence from other parts of the world, because they kept on saying that you should be aware of your world, the world outside of your little world. So that's what will expand your horizons. That's what will make you a global citizen. Don't
absolutely.
limit yourself to these little boundaries all the time. And that made me more interested in global storytelling. So, just for our viewers understanding, how even here the two of us, we come from two different perspectives, and the intentions are so similar that we both wanted to tell local stories, but from two
Mm,
different point of views, right?
absolutely, 100%. You know, it the world has always been global, so I don't know why, I don't know why publishing is so segregated. Honestly, the world has always been global. You know, from I mean, even way before the 1500s, we had the Portuguese traveling the world. We had trade and all that, right? But the world has always been trading, right? And I think particularly Eliav Shafak's stories, like which I love also, you know, they take you back to an old world, right? Where, you know, there is a bit of a nostalgia for that, isn't it?
Mm,
Or at least for me, where it's so familiar, yet it's different. Yet, I mean, I'm not Turkish, I didn't grow up in Turkey or whatever,
yeah.
but I yet there are these familiar themes in these stories that Shafak writes about that I so love. And there's of course the voice. We talked about voice in another episode, you know, and just so many things really to kind of say about these global stories. The world has always been global,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And we've always, I mean, for me, I remember reading 1001 Arabian Nights, and that is probably where I got that nested narrative inspiration from. Actually, now that I'm
Yes.
telling you this or sharing this, and it's just so magnificent. And I remember reading um comics actually, the 1000 the Monkey King's Journey to the West,
Hmm.
right? It was 100 stories, and I remember thinking, oh, each chapter is so fascinating. And
Yes.
that's probably where the magic realism
Yeah.
comes in, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So when we say that local stories or all stories are local, and every story, every local story has a global appeal, if we just see it from a different perspective, what doesn't work? Like, when does a local story doesn't become a global story? Do we have those examples?
Mm. Um, that's a good question, actually. I mean, I feel that all the stories I've ever read by British authors are very relevant to me. Or wait, sorry, maybe should rephrase that. Like when I was reading Dickens, obviously it's
Mm,
not relevant to me because I didn't live in 19th century England or whatever. Um, but it gave me it opened up a world to me,
mm,
right?
mm,
Um, was it relevant to my childhood? Probably not, but what was relevant was that there was poverty in these stories that he wrote about. There were children that were, um, I suppose abused by society,
yeah,
right? Or
yeah,
disadvantaged by society. And those are local themes, right? That I mean, global themes that you can understand as a person, as
yes.
anyone living anywhere in the world. I don't know where it doesn't work. Stories are stories and stories will work because there is a universal structure to a story, isn't it? A beginning, a middle, and an end. It's the
Mm,
Aristotelian structure, right? Since Aristotle, you know, we know that there is a beginning, there is a middle, and an end, and that, this is how stories work, right?
mm,
And wherever the world it is, wherever it is set in the world, doesn't matter,
yeah.
right?
I agree, but at the same time, I mean, while we were talking, this question just popped in my head that we are talking about stories that work, but what happens when a story doesn't work? And
Mm.
when I asked you that question, I was also trying to look for the answer, and probably what I feel is and there could be other answers as well. At least to me, at this point, I could think of two answers. One is there are certain things which are very specific to a culture, and that is one of those things is the sense
Oh,
of
yeah.
humor.
Ah, yeah. I
Sense
didn't
of
think about that.
humor,
Yeah, that is
yes,
true.
yes, it might not work,
Yes.
globally, because
Mm.
your sense of humor could be very different from my sense of humor. The British sense of humor is very different from, let's say, Chinese sense of humor or Korean sense of humor. And
Yeah.
I've faced it. I mean, I'm sure you too have faced it, because when we work in multicultural societies, it's like talking to a different people, a different
Yeah.
community, right? A different person from a different culture, and you crack a joke and you realize suddenly the temperature of the room is different because they didn't get it. So I feel the sense of humor is a very local thing sometimes. I mean, now we are exposed to a lot more international uh, stories, whether in the form of cinema or content on OTT platforms or whatever. That's why maybe we are more exposed to those things. That's why we can relate to them more. But in general, I would say the sense of humor is something where it might not work. And the other thing which might not work to me is something very specific, something that only happens in my society, let's say in my culture, in a very closed environment. I mean, yes, it would be a good story. I'm not doubting whether the story is bad or structurally the story is bad or anything. It can be a great story, but it might not have that global appeal because because of its local nature, that it is so local that nobody else could relate to that idea. You know what I mean? Like, it's like
Yes, I
you
do.
you
Yeah.
like the story, you understand where the story is coming from, but you don't identify or you don't relate to the characters at all.
Yeah. I think I know where you're coming from, and that is pertinent for our viewers in the sense that it has to do with commerciality,
Hmm. Hmm.
because if you did
Yes.
write that kind of local stories, that's very, and even if you throw in all these global themes like love and all that, it might not work. That is true because maybe the publishing house that is, or your agent, for
Yeah.
example, you
Hmm.
know, who are, here in the UK or in the, in USA, so in the West, let's just say, they might not get it,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Because it's really specifically that local. But these stories will still get published, but in the regions,
Yes.
say
Yeah.
in India
Yeah.
or in Singapore. So for example, you know, Grandpa Ye's Journey West
Hmm.
is a very local Singapore story,
Hmm.
right? As I said earlier, although it has it has the universal theme of immigration, this story would never get a home in the UK, sadly,
Hmm.
because it's just the way it is, right? The market here is not interested in a Singapore centric immigration story,
Yeah.
but does it mean that it should never be published?
Hmm. Yeah.
Right? Because it is important to the children of Singapore, even to Malaysia, right?
Hmm.
Because Singapore and Malaysia were once the same country, but anyway, long time ago. So there is that relevance there. So if you have that kind of story to tell,
Hmm.
don't stop yourself because I think you will find someone, a publisher who will publish it. I mean, I worked with an independent publisher for this story. It's a small boutique publisher in Singapore called Pepper Dot Press,
Hmm.
right? And Pepper Dot Press is actually very unique in the sense that it is only interested in publishing Singapore stories, Singapore local
Yeah.
stories,
Yeah.
because the founder, there are two founders, the founders of Pepper Dot Press, realized that if we don't tell these stories, we will have generations, not just one, we will have generations of children in Singapore not knowing their history at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, and I felt that it was important to tell. So I wanted to work with that publisher. So yeah,
Definitely.
that's a really good point actually. I didn't think about that so much.
No,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, this is what happens when we talk, right? And I think
Mm,
that's where I would like to take this conversation before ending it, that any story, whether it's a local story, global story, local story, whether it's working locally or globally, I don't know. But every story matters because
mhm.
every story is a conversation starter. And every story might not give you answers, but every story has the potential to make the reader ask some questions, whether it's about questions that are locally relevant or globally relevant. But the idea behind every story is to create options for questions and then help the reader to find their own answers, craft their own answers. And that's what I guess we also try to do in Picture Book Matters. So we talk and we question each other, we question our audience, and we share some food
Yeah,
for thought um,
yeah.
for today and tomorrow.
Absolutely. And what we do is really as storytellers, what we do and as friends and podcasters, what we do really is to open doors to possibilities, right? To let people know and see that there are possibilities. It's not, I mean, even as publishing is very pigeonholing and all that, which is another conversation we shall have another day. But there are possibilities to all this, and stories stay alive because people share these stories. It
Yes.
all goes back to oral storytelling, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So
The
that's
origin, the original form of storytelling before it became printed,
yes,
right?
yes. And
Yeah,
on that note, we should tell everybody to keep sharing and
please.
Keep liking our podcast and please subscribe to our channel so that we can reach out to more people, more like minded people, and our stories could reach out to more people. So, thank
Yes.
you again for listening, for seeing us, and we will see you again.
Thank you. Bye bye.